The Puma Deviate Nitro Elite 3 was my favorite racing shoe of 2024. It's the shoe I reached for the toughest workouts of my last training block, and it's the shoe I decided to race in for my recent half marathon PB attempt. And now it's time to talk about the Puma Deviate Nitro Elite 3 after 100 miles. Yo, what's going on? My name is Kafuzi and I'm an elite runner who reviews running shoes here on YouTube. And today I want to talk to you guys all about the Puma Deviate Nitro Elite 3 after 100 miles. But before I give you my thoughts on this shoe, I do want to go over some disclosures. This is a pair of shoes that Puma sent to me for the purpose of review, so I did not have to pay for these shoes. However, no one's paying me to make this video or to include their brand in this video, and no one's going to get a chance to preview any of my footage or my thoughts before you guys get a chance to see this video on YouTube. So with that disclosure out of the way, let's talk about the Deviate Nitro Elite 3, and let's start with how I've been using the shoe over the last 100 miles. This is a shoe that I've been using for going fast, whether it's 200-meter repeats on the road or anything as slow as marathon effort. This is a shoe that has been a really good choice for those tough sessions. Part of it's because it's really lightweight, and part of it's because that upper is nice and snug in all the right ways that I want for a fast shoe without it doing any undue pinching or squeezing. And the main story about this shoe for me is the foam that's in here. The Nitro Elite foam made out of that aliphatic TPU is just a magical material that I've fallen in love with. It gives you a great amount of shock absorption without being too squishy. And then after the compression, it bounces back in a really quick and snappy way that I think is perfectly suited for fast running. The shoe has a really aggressive angle of attack, and so it feels like it has a much higher drop than it actually does. And I think part of that is the way that the foam is shaped, but I think part of it also has to do with that plate position. But all put together, that results in a shoe that feels really quick and snappy for turnover. I most recently used it last weekend for the half marathon at Houston, where I was trying to go for a PB. Didn't quite hit the mark on that day, but the shoe had nothing to do with that. I feel like it was a fantastic choice for a half marathon. I'd be very comfortable racing in this shoe up to the full marathon as well, but this shoe provided that great amount of cushion that I want for a longer road race with the snappiness and kind of like sense of superness that I want from a super shoe. The Puma Deviate Nitro Elite 3 certainly delivered. Next, let's talk about how this shoe has been holding up over the last 100 miles. And as someone who has just recently tried to make a PR attempt in this shoe, I feel like I have a really good sense of just how well this foam is performing at this 100-mile mark. And I say the foam still feels really great. I think it's still fantastic for racing. I think there's still plenty of races left in this shoe. And then after that, I think it could be a really good training companion. But the 100-mile mark is certainly not the end of life for this shoe. Puma says that this shoe has kind of two kinds of longevity to it. One is kind of within a run longevity, so it doesn't have kind of that power fade that some other foams might have when you get late into the race. It just kind of feels like the foam isn't responding the way it used to at the beginning of the run. This shoe definitely lives up to that promise, but I also think that it could live up to the promise that Puma makes in terms of the overall longevity, saying that this foam can handle a lot more mileage and still be race ready compared to a lot of the other competition that's out there on the market. Now, I've only got this shoe up to about like 115 in terms of total mileage, and I'd say that there's still plenty of life left in this. Usually for me, for most racing shoes these days, you know, I'd say that like racing up to the 150-mile mark is a good place to kind of retire your shoes from racing, at which point they still could be very useful as session shoes. And I think that I could probably say at least the same thing here, where I'd be very happy taking this for racing up to the 150-mile mark, and then I think it would have another 100 miles, if not a lot more, in terms of session work that this shoe could put in, whether that's bringing it along for your long runs or for your shorter, faster stuff as well. I think that the shoe foam is holding up very nicely. The upper itself also looks pretty pristine. This ultra weave material doesn't exactly mold to your foot because it's not like a fabric textile type of material, but there is some shaping to my foot that's happening on here that makes the shoe feel just a little bit more comfortable and lived in whenever you put your foot in there. And there's only two little tiny spots of kind of the beginning of some fraying happening on the tongue here, but that's not gonna really become a problem anytime soon for this shoe. So the upper, I think, fits really great, has been functioning really great for me, and I also think is holding up really well. Now, in terms of some visual creasing and visual aspects of damage, we could see some of that in the midsole foam that's on here, but it's very minor, not as much as you would see with like a traditional Puma midsole foam. But the most elements of damage that I'm seeing on this are on the outsole, and even then, I feel like it's probably in the normal range for this type of outsole and for this type of shoe. I'd say that the Puma grip here is doing well, still feels very grippy, but there are some signs of wear that are happening. There was some paint on the outsole here, both on the rubber and then on the actual foam itself of that big cat Puma logo. A lot of that has faded over the miles, and that's purely going to be cosmetic, but it does show that there is some kind of friction happening between those portions of the outsole, whether it's the exposed midsole foam or the rubber outsole itself, and the road. And there are some parts of the purely exposed foam that are showing a little bit of signs of scuffing, but even there, it's holding up a lot better than I would normally expect to see in a race caliber shoe at a 100-mile mark. There is a little bit of wear happening on some of my normal high wear areas, the lateral part of the heel and right underneath the pads of the foot, and I'm seeing that here as well. For the heel, I'm seeing just a tiny bit more wear than I would kind of normally see, but nothing I would say that's out of ordinary. And same thing I would say for the pads of the feet. I'm seeing pretty much what's normal and typical for me in terms of a race shoe at the 100-mile mark. So I'd say Puma has done a really good job of kind of striking that balance of needing to make a shoe be able to last a reasonable amount of time for a race shoe, but without compromising pure performance too much. Before we wrap up this video, let's take a moment to step back and see where the Deviate Nitro Elite 3 fits within the broader Puma lineup. Now, whenever I take a look at a brand, I always like to start with the Daily Trainer, and from Puma, that is the Velocity. This is the Velocity Nitro 3. A Daily Trainer is a shoe that you can bring out for pretty much most of your runs that you're doing throughout the course of the week. Anything that's just kind of a regular, everyday, easy run, the Daily Trainer is going to be the shoe that you bring with you. And then the Deviate Nitro Elite 3 would be the shoe that you would race in. It's a shoe you reach for on race day and any of those really big, super important workouts. Now, you might say like, well, what about this other shoe from Puma, the Puma Fast R? This is also a great shoe that has aliphatic TPU, a stiff carbon fiber plate, and is intended for racing. And this is an either or situation. You would race in either the Puma Fast R or the Deviate Nitro Elite 3. They kind of serve the same role in the lineup, and a lot of it just comes down to preference in terms of which one you would pick. Now, in between the Daily Trainer and a race shoe is something called like the Session shoe or the Tempo shoe, something that has kind of some racing features but has a little bit more durability for more mileage. And for Puma, that's another fantastic shoe. This is my shoe of the year last year. That's the Deviate Nitro 3. This is a shoe that you could use for tempo runs, a lot of your workouts, a lot of tough sessions you could do in the Nitro Elite 3, and you could even do some easy running in it as well. And then for those days where you're super tired from all those workouts and you want something that's a little bit more comfy than what the Daily Trainer could provide, that's where I read for a max cushion shoe. And Puma has a couple different options that could fit this role, but today let's talk about the Mag Max. This is a shoe that is a jumbo stack height shoe that has a bunch of really soft, squishy foam in there, but it's not too mushy. So you still got a little bit of pep in your step in this shoe, and it's really fun to take for recovery runs or anytime you're just going to be on your feet running for a really long period of time. This is a really fun lineup that you could put together using the Deviate Nitro Elite 3 and only shoes from Puma. Now, most people don't necessarily need to have a 4-shoe rotation, and I think if you were going to do a 3-shoe rotation from Puma, I'd actually get rid of the Daily Trainer just because the tempo shoe, the Deviate Nitro 3, is so pace versatile. And then I guess if you were going to whittle it down even further to get to 2 shoes, I think I'd probably get rid of the racing shoe here, because if you're using 2 shoes, you may not need the extra level of kind of aggressiveness and race performance of that shoe, and you could probably do a lot of really great racing in the Deviate Nitro 3. I know a lot of you guys have been using it for your marathon racing as well as your marathon training as well, and depending on what your goals are for your marathon races, this could be a really great way to put together a 2-shoe lineup from Puma. Now let's wrap up the video by going over the buying guide, and then we'll also talk about some alternatives out there. The Puma Deviate Nitro Elite 3 finished 2024 as my favorite racing shoe of the year, and into 2025, it's still one of my favorites. And at $230 retail, it's a refreshing bargain at a time where super shoes are getting hyper expensive. But let's see what the competition has to offer. I think the first shoe that I think about when I think about alternatives to the Deviate Nitro Elite 3 is from Asics, and that's the Metaspeed Edge Paris. I think that these 2 shoes are really trying to accomplish the same things in a lot of the same ways. They are some of the lightest racing shoes that I've ever tested, and they both have very aggressive angles of attack. It just feels like you're kind of put up onto your toes a little bit more than what the heel drops would suggest. And I think part of that's due to the foam that they're using, and part of that is through plate position. Now, what I will say about the Metaspeed Edge Paris is that this is a shoe that I think I could run up to the half marathon max in it. And that's mainly because the plate position in the shoe just does something a little bit funny underneath my arches. And after that, when I'm in the shoe for a long period of time, it starts to really fatigue my feet. I know a lot of you guys have been running in this shoe and have been running your marathons, and it has been working well for you. But for someone who's more of a Metaspeed Sky Paris type of person, the Metaspeed Edge Paris is really something that I only look for stuff that's on the extra fast side of things. The Metaspeed Edge Paris comes in at $250. And then the other shoe that I would look at if you're looking at the Deviate Nitro Elite 3 is the Vaporfly 3. Again, this is a shoe that is trying to do some very similar things in very similar ways. This shoe also has a very aggressive angle of attack where it feels like you're really put up on your toes despite whatever the heel drop is on this shoe. Now, this shoe doesn't give me the same problems with the plate position that I get with the Metaspeed Edge Paris, but yet I still feel like it's an even more aggressive shoe than the Metaspeed Edge Paris or the Deviate Nitro Elite 3. I feel like it's putting me up even further up on my toes. I feel like it's encouraging even more of a fast, quick, snappy turnover, and it just really likes to run fast. And if you wanted to get into this shoe, it retails at $260. Some versions are up to $270, so you're paying quite a premium over the price of the Deviate Nitro Elite 3, but it's been around for a while now, so you can find it at some reputable places for a pretty good bargain. So those are my thoughts on the Deviate Nitro Elite 3 after 100 miles. Let me know in the comments if you have any other questions about this shoe or any of the shoes that I talked about today. Or better yet, stop by the live stream that I do Mondays and Thursdays over on the Kofuzi Run Club channel. I'd love to see you guys over there in the chat. That's all I have for today, everybody. Thanks so much for making it all the way to the end of this video. Hopefully you guys are staying safe out there on your runs, and I'll see you in the next one.
Yo, what's going on?